This is Gretchen, the Verdant crafter. Today I'm working on my second set of cards for my Celebrate Teachers card set for 2018. I am making cards to give to the teachers and the support staff that I work with, and I work with directly or pretty often. I would love to make cards for all of the teachers and support staff at my school, and I could, but I know I would forget someone. So in my case, I choose to make cards for and give them to the people that I work with most often and most closely, the people that I've formed some sort of connection with. Again, someday I hope to make them for everyone, but at this time I know I'm going to forget someone. So I am using for my images a stamp set from Studio G. This is distributed by Hampton Arts, and it was very inexpensive. So the polymer is very low quality. The ink doesn't really stick to it. So you saw that I used Versamark ink to stamp down first, and then I'm using a hybrid ink pad. This is Crimson from Hero Arts, and in the stamping that I did, I found that the hybrid ink pads worked the best. I made some stamps, or I stamped some of the apples with Hero Arts Strawberry Shadow ink, and I also stamped with some of the Distress Oxide ink colors, but I really felt those apples didn't turn out very well, so I didn't use them at all. These are all of the apples that I cut out, and I did use that little die that was on the screen. Now I'm laying them out in a pattern that I really like and I actually don't use. If I was smart, I would have used some press and seal or taken a picture with my phone, or even slid it to the side and added another card where I transfer it to, but I wasn't smart. So while I lay this out and love it, I don't use it. The ink colors that I used two reds. So the darker red is the Crimson Hybrid ink from Hero Arts. The slightly lighter red, so the one to the right of the screen, is Hero Arts Strawberry Shadow ink. I also use Hero Arts Hybrid Moss ink for the darker green, the one that's on the far left. The bright green is from Simon Says Stamp, and it's the Key Lime Hybrid ink. The yellow is Simon Says Stamp Lemon Zest Hybrid ink, and all of the seeds are stamped with the black Hero Arts Intense Black ink. All of my sentiments are stamped on circles of Nina White solder cardstock with Versafine ink, and the stamps that I use are from my current favorite stamp set, or favorite sentiment stamp set. Thank You Teacher from Simon Says Stamp. I used these yesterday, and they are simply fantastic. Be somebody who makes everybody feel like a somebody. I think that's an incredibly important sentiment and idea. Everyone deserves to feel like somebody and to be treated like that. Some students come into our classroom and they want to fall to the background. They want to be ignored. They don't want to be called on. They simply want to exist. And it's very easy for those students to fall into the background for various reasons. If you're not participating, you're not causing trouble, it's very easy for them to fall in the background, unfortunately. So I make a point to treat everyone like they are somebody, and I hope that that makes them feel like they're somebody. One of the sentiments that I use a lot in this video is "Education is the most powerful weapon, which you can use to change the world" by Nelson Mandela. So all of these cards are going to teachers at my school. It's our first week with students. We're starting on Tuesday, and it's very exciting. It's also nerve-wracking because it's starting a new year. You know what classes you're teaching. You might know some of your students, but you might not. I work in a fairly small school, so it's not outside the realm of reason that you know everyone, or at least have heard about them. I'm sure more of my students, I've heard who they are, I've heard people talk about them, but I have this bad habit of, if I don't know them, I don't really retain information about them. So for all of these sort of apple wreaths, you see that I tuck one end under and sort of pop the other up, and I'm not popping it up with foam tape, I'm just creating an overlapping pattern of wreaths. That really seemed to be my theme. You saw in my other video, I stamped wreaths using the Gina K Designs Wreath Builder with apples, and now I'm using some of the same stamps and forming wreaths from these die cuts. So this is a very simple card. I didn't put any embellishments on it, and it's definitely one that you could give to anyone, male or female. I often think that I could give any of my cards to someone who's male or female, but when it comes down to it, I tend to give the ones that are less blinged out to male colleagues, male students, male people that I know. Although now that I know my students better, I certainly know some of them who would be like, yeah, it's got glitter, totally awesome, cool. Here's a hint. If you don't know, teenage boys love glitter glue. My classroom was covered in it. My students were covered in it. It was amazing, and it was one of my best memories from teaching last year. So I have a sentiment that I made yesterday. I stamped in white heat embossed my sentiment on vellum, and then I rubbed the Crimson Hybrid ink pad on it and dried it, and I mounted it on a piece of white cardstock. On the edge, and you saw that I cut it down so that it's a little smaller than my card base, which is an A2 card base, 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and they are all top folding cards. Here I'm using some fun foam to pop up the place where I've built my image, or I will build it, where I've glued down my sentiments. And I'm doing this so that you can see some red peeking out of the edge. And it's the same red as the apples, and it's the same red as my sentiment circle. So it all matches together. And in this case, I had a little bit of red fun foam, so that matches too. Isn't it nice when things are sort of matchy-matchy? So here I'm just using some foam tape to pop up those apples. I was trying to use fun foam, but I found that it was just a little bit too complicated or fussy, so it was easier to just use fun foam. Okay, and there's that card. Very simple, very easy. I love the sentiment. It takes a big heart to shape little minds, but I think that sentiment is better used for grade school or even middle school teachers, probably grade school teachers. I certainly work with high school age students. They aren't little by any stretch of the imagination, and I think some of them would take offense to being called a little mind. But I also think it's an amusing sentiment knowing my students and knowing some of the teachers I work with. So I will strategically give this card to some of them. There you saw I covered the back of that sentiment with double-sided foam dot tape runner that's removable. And I put my images on so everything's lined up, it works nicely. And I'm putting foam tape at the back of all of those apples. I'm going to peel that off and stick it to my card base. And then I'm going to end up, and here you can see that I'm adding foam to my sentiment. And I can do that because I am using the removable adhesive. If I was putting it right on my sentiment, I would rip or risk ripping my sentiment when I remove the sentiment. You can see here, I'm adding another layer of foam tape to the wreath, to my, oh my goodness, words, to my sentiment, so it's popped up a little bit more than the wreath. I'm going to end up building one more circle wreath like this, and I'm going to use the same pattern. And you're going to see that I do something really stupid at one point. I was trying to be smart. I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. The reason I put foam tape down twice was so my sentiment is popped up more. And if I had just glued it down, I was afraid it would not be as visible. Here you can see that I'm putting foam tape down on my sentiment, and then I'm going to put foam tape on the back of some of these apples. Now, what I actually meant to do was put it on the back of the apples that are in the front, so those would be popped up, but that's not what I did. So you can see here that I'm going to pull off some of those apples. And so those are all popped up with foam tape. And I'm going to use glue on the rest of the apples and stick them between the apples that are stuck down. And I'm going to use, I think, just one layer of foam tape on my sentiment. Oh, nope, 2 layers, except it's fun foam. Oops. All of these cards, except for the last one, I think, are made without using any sort of extra embellishments. Here, this card is very simple. I'm putting down a couple apples together. So I'm going to put 3 down sort of in back and then 2 more in front. And then I'm going to add 1 more apple that I glue down by my sentiment. With them all connected, they sort of flow better. And I think they look very nice together. I love that this stamp set came with 4 stamps that are almost identical, so they can all use the same die, but they're a little different. So you have the full apple, you have the one that's sliced in half, you have the one that sort of looks like it's sliced, a quarter has been sliced out, and then you have the heart apple. This stamp set also comes with 1 sentiment that says "Thanks a bushel" and a leaf. I don't use either the sentiment or the leaf. So if you know any teachers out there, this is a stressful time of year. Say thank you, give them some encouraging words. It's always crazy. You're going to have more students than you're told or you have seats for. I certainly have that. I'm going to have a classroom and I don't have enough seats for them. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. It's going to be interesting. Luckily, it's only 1 class where I have too many students and not enough seats. Here I'm gluing down these apples in a pattern, and I'm not quite sure why I added the middle apple because my sentiment totally covers it. I'm popping this up with some fun foam, and then I move it around. So in the end, I actually glued another apple on top of the other just because I got so much glue on it, and it was so hard to get off. Here I have all of those apples that I die cut that are just blank. And I'm gluing them down in a diagonal line. I'm using a ruler to make sure that they're straight. I'm going to cut them off, and on top of one of those apples, I'm going to glue, because I only have left, a green apple. But that's okay. Who doesn't love a good Granny Smith apple? So yeah, encourage your teachers, donate some supplies to a school if you can manage that. If you can't, just an encouraging word. It's always helpful and it's always nice. The only sort of embellishment I do on any of these cards is adding some glossy accents to the seeds and letting that dry. So here are all of the cards that I made. These cards are fairly simple. The most time-consuming thing was individually die cutting out all of the apples. So if I had to do it again, I would actually buy 2 of the stamp sets, so then I would have 2 dies. They were inexpensive enough that, it would be okay. And I did not show you that one card that I made, the last card I showed. I used the Hero Arts Bold Graphic Confetti die for my background. I glued 4 of those leftover apples and then the sentiment, and I added some, they're just random rhinestones that came from, one of those like secondhand salvage type stores. They're just a little glittery. Thank you so much for watching. I hope these inspired you. I hope you have a great day. Thank you. Bye.